Thanks for watching.
This message is provided by the Tom Karlin Foundation.
Tom was the son of Joe and Amy Karlin and the brother to Ben, Anna, and Mary Beth.
Tom was a senior in high school with a bright future ahead. He took his own life in November of 2011.
Amidst the pain and grief, the family was moved to form the Tom Karlin Foundation to ensure as few families as possible had to deal with the loss of a loved one to suicide.
In addition to teen suicide prevention, the Tom Karlin Foundation mission also includes educating teens and their parents on depression awareness and treatment.
The Foundation's message has 3 parts.
Reduce stigma, seek help for self, and help others with Talk, Listen, Act.
We welcome any opportunity to present to parents, teachers, or teens.
If you would like more information on the Tom Karlin Foundation or would like to inquire about a presentation to your group, please contact us at
The phone was recorded January 19, 2015 during a community conversation on ways to prevent teen suicide.
%2 of deaths are suicide, so that's a real thing we need to be concerned about. But the fact is, 1 in 5 people, by the time they're 25, will have been at some point clinically depressed. So we're talking about 20% of the population who is struggling. And on average, it takes a person 10 years from the time they get depressed to the time they get help. So our foundation is focused on that as well, so that we can get those kids the help they need sooner rather than later, because depression is treatable, and we can keep them from hurting to get to a dark place where suicide seems like the answer. I kind of envision depression as a spectrum. You know, some of us were just born at different spots in that spectrum. Some of us just may naturally be a little bit closer to the point where we feel like we have episodes of depression. It's tougher to pull back away from that brink. Kevin Brill is a comedian of all things, 20-year-old comedian who is on TED Talks, if you follow TED. And he explains depression as, it's not feeling sad when things are going bad, but it's feeling sad when everything's going right. I've heard it described as, I'm in a hole in a pit and someone pulled up the ladder. As a long, long tunnel, and I can't even see the end of that tunnel. I have no idea how I'm going to get through that. So sometimes we struggle, and I struggle with things happening in the brain and understanding exactly how that would relate to what I'm dealing with or what I'm going through. So I like to think of this comparison from a physical perspective. So we're going to pick a guy named Jim. And Jim didn't know it, but before Jim was born, he had a predisposition to cancer. Nothing he knew, nothing his parents knew. It was just the way he was born. So Jim was born, grew up, everything was normal until one day he noticed in his stomach he had a pain. Didn't think much of it. A month later he realized that pain was there and it was probably a little worse. Time goes by, he didn't do anything about it. A year later he realizes that pain is there all the time. It hurts. And after that, he stops eating as much. And he doesn't have the energy he had before, but he doesn't go to the doctor. And the pain gets worse and worse, and he can't eat anything, he doesn't have any energy. And then one day, he catches a cold, of all things, turns into pneumonia, and he dies. So had he gone to the doctor at any point in time, he likely could have had that cancer taken care of. At the beginning, it might have just been surgery. Later on, it might have been some radiation or chemo. But at any point in time, he could have gotten that fixed so that his body wasn't weakened and in a state where the cold could attack him, turn to pneumonia, and he would die. So that's an example in the physical world. You know, I don't know exactly what Tom went through in his life, but I have a vision. If I try to juxtapose it to You know, that physical example of Jim and his struggles with his cancer. You know, Tom likely was born a little more susceptible to depression. He was always a happy kid, but I think he did a pretty good job of masking it. And so he was born that way. There was nothing he could do about it. There was nothing he could change about it. His mom and I didn't even know about it. I do know as Tom grew up, we found this out later, he had something from his environment that impacted the way he lived. He told us that in his childhood he had been molested. I don't know whether that started the cancer or it fed a cancer, but that was impactful in his life. And I know that those things welled up and grew in him. And it caused him to get weaker and weaker each day. And as I look back now at the last 2 or 3 months of his life, I see that he was very weak. And that cancer had really eaten at him. But never did he stop and ask for help. We would have moved heaven and earth for him, but he never asked. And so through his life, as he's trying to figure out how to deal with this, I believe he's moving down that spectrum closer and closer to depression. And something happened in the last week, last day, last hour, that he couldn't recover from because he hadn't sought help before. You know, Tom didn't want to die. Sierra didn't want to die. Katie didn't want to die. They just had more pain in their life than they knew how to deal with. First and foremost, we need to destigmatize mental health and depression. If someone breaks their arm, we wouldn't think twice about going to the doctor. But if there's something wrong with our brain, we are embarrassed. And society tells us to be embarrassed and to hide that fact. We need to make it as common as any physical ailment. So that's first and foremost. Somewhat related is empowering people to reach out when they're hurting. Nobody knows you better than you know you. I was living in the same house with Tom. There's probably nobody closer to Tom than me, and I didn't see what he was struggling with. So yes, we want to watch out for others, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first and foremost, I'm going to talk to the teens especially. If you are hurting now or in the future, please get help. You may have seen the stats. 1 in 5 people between the time they're 15 to 24 is at some point clinically depressed. So when it feels like we're on an island and we're the only ones going through it, think about 5 of your friends or 10 of your friends, and 2 of the 10 are at some point going to struggle with that. So you're not alone in facing this depression. And you need not be alone in dealing with it. So that's a big part of what our message from the foundation is. What do we do about suicide and depression, and how can we treat that? So our tagline is talk, listen, act. The talk, in my mind, is about being vulnerable. It's about telling our parents when we're hurting. It's about telling our friends when we are hurting. It's about opening up and putting it out there. The listen, that's in large part when we're looking out for other people. That's about listening and watching. You know, listening to what they're saying, watching what they're doing. Tweets, Facebook posts. Sometimes we see some that are concerning, and we know we need to act on that. You know, my kids go to Shawnee Mission West, and I think that school has become very good at, if a kid posts something or tweets something that is concerning, they are all over it. I mean, they take it incredibly seriously. So I would encourage you to do the same thing. If you're concerned about somebody, reach out to them, their parents, a counselor, coach, whatever. But listen to what they're doing. Watching what they're doing as well. Some warning signs of depression are things like risk-taking. You know, if someone is driving 100 miles an hour, running red lights, that could be a problem. If someone is abusing alcohol and drugs, well, in the industry, they call that self-medication. That's a problem. What they're doing is they're numbing some pain that may be inside, but you can't numb the pain without numbing joy. And so that can be a problem that creates more problems as kids or adults turn to drugs and alcohol. So that's talk, listen, lastly, act. And ACT is actually an acrostic that stands for acknowledge, care and concern, and treatment. And the acknowledge is that we get in somebody's face and we say, hey, I see you're hurting, or I see some posts that really concern me, or you said something that has me concerned. I care. Care is the C. I care too much about you. I'm really concerned. Treatment. Let's go talk to coach. Let's go talk to the principal. I'm going to call your parents. Would you please come with me? It's taking that person to help. Realize nowhere in there did I say it's your job to fix that person. People have come to me over the last 3 years. It's not my job to fix them. What I do is I get them to the professionals who can help them out. So talk, listen, act. We're going to turn it over to Brooke now. She's going to visit a little bit, and then we'll break into groups.
We live in a really, really exceptional community. Part of our exceptional community is the ability to really have a lot of choices, to do a lot of things and a lot of opportunities and a great education and a lot of wonderful people around us. And sometimes when we're in this community of how are you doing? I'm fine, things are great, everything's well, it's really, really hard for people to be vulnerable and acknowledge that they're hurting. And so some of the protective factors that we can put in place as families or friends, I also heard a little bit of talk over social media, and definitely kind of acknowledging that anytime somebody is trying to process pain or hurt over any form of social media, that's a problem. Social media, we're not going to get the connection or the intimate relationship or the heartfelt hug that we need from, Kick, or I think Ask FM is really big these days, or Snapchat. We're not going to be able to get what we need emotionally from any of those venues. So really encouraging friends, kids, anybody in our community to really talk about what's going on. We were just talking a little bit earlier about how empowering just saying, "Are you okay?" or "I'm worried about you" can be for somebody who's walking around in their day, everything's fine, and generally we hear, gosh, they seemed really happy, or they were upset, for a little bit, but, overall seemed like they were in a pretty good mood. We hear these things a lot about people who attempt to take their lives or people who actually have taken their lives, and so often it just takes that vulnerability to be able to say, gosh, I really am hurting, and there are people out there who can walk me through this. When we're going to ask somebody, when we're concerned about somebody, it's very, very, very important for us to ask, have you thought of taking your life? Have you thought of suicide? It's very, very important that we use appropriate language. It only takes that extra step we are not going to suggest. By asking, are you suicidal, or have you thought of taking your life, we are not going to put the idea in somebody's mind. It's really, really important that we ask those questions. To ask kids or grown-ups if they had thought about taking their life. It does a lot. That one question goes a really long way. Sometimes it helps people just feel like they've been seen, like somebody really, really understands me. Or, maybe I'm not masking my sadness as good as I thought, or maybe I do need help. And so really just being willing to ask that question. If anybody ever says that they are having thoughts of taking their life, we would always, always direct you to get them to the nearest hospital. We don't want to leave it up to us to decide, better safe than sorry. If anybody talks about taking their life, then we want to get them straight to the emergency room.
Thanks again for watching.
With your help, we can prevent teen suicide. Suicide is preventable and depression is treatable.